He joins us right now. Congressman, welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
I got to tell you, I mean, you know, to me from day one, when the president came out, when this happened, I was on the air, and he was talking to an American Indian group, and he came out and he gave a shout out to chiefs in the audience, and about 2.5 minutes into it, he got around to telling us about this tragedy that took place. And here we are, fast forward to today. And the refusal of this government to call this jihadist attack what it was by a man yelling Allah Akbar, and to see the real horrific tragedy in it all, these victims who were lucky enough to survive are being treated like dirt by our own government.
Well, and it's not just the ones that have survived, it's their family members. We've had in my office recently some of the victims that actually still have bullets in them, but also some of the deceased spouses, and just, you know, the struggles that they have trying to raise families on their own without you know, somebody that's the breadwinner, so to speak. And so, you know, when we hear about the constant delays of this court-martial because the guy has a beard or what have you, as a former prosecutor, a former Army officer, it's just, I mean, it's like a circus, and it's embarrassing. And, you know, but worse off, it sends a message to this country and to young people that this is how we treat those that wear the uniform. And that's why, you know, we tried to take a little bit of a leadership role here lately, as far as not only with regard to this pay issue, but also, you know, obviously just trying to make sure that the victims get the benefits and the accolades that they deserve.
Well, what can Congress do, sir, and what has Congress done so far, if anything?
Well, the congressman from that district, Judge Carter, has sponsored legislation since the incident, basically to get the victims the services and the Purple Hearts that they deserve, etc. We recently came across a letter from the Secretary of the Army, basically saying that the Justice Department would designate whether or not this could be changed from workplace violence to an act of terror.
The Justice Department.
The Justice Department. So we had in my committee Eric Holder. And I asked him about this. I said, well, the Department of Army Secretary has basically said it's your call. And he's like, I have nothing to do with it. This is DOD. And then I said, well, why would the Secretary of Army said that he's deferring to the Justice Department? So now we, along with, and this is bipartisan, this is not a partisan issue. We have a Democrat from Philadelphia, a Republican from Virginia, and myself have written a letter to the new Secretary of Defense, hoping that because it's a new Secretary of Defense that he will change the classification from workplace violence to an act of terror, and then these guys will be able to get the care that they need. The important thing here to remember also is that, you know, if you think about the Boston bombings, if these two guys that were, you know, that were part of the obvious terrorist attack there, but were, you know, working for the city, it would be akin to them being classified as a workplace violence situation rather than, you know, an act of terror. And the reason that we constantly get why they don't want to change it is because they're worried about prejudicing the panel, or as we say in the military, the panel, it's the jury. They don't want the jurors to hear congressmen saying that we believe it's an act of terror, and we're going to codify that into law, and therefore that the jury is going to somehow be tainted that, well, the U.S. government thinks it's a terrorist act, so therefore he must be guilty, as if these panelists can't use their own judgment. And, oh, by the way, the 13 deaths that
but so, Congressman, am I to understand that it's your opinion that by that logic, and I'm not indicting you here, but by that logic going forward, you could have several soldiers, God forbid, tomorrow shoot up a fort shouting Allah Akbar and kill all, you know, we're doing this in the name of Muslims and whatever, just like as occurred in the streets of London today where they beheaded an off-duty soldier. And by that logic, the government would have to classify that as workplace violence. Otherwise, the jury would be, in their view, tainted again. I mean, am I correct?
That's correct. And I think that there is an undercurrent in this administration to try and do everything that they can, whether it's, you know, not to change the subject, but what happened in Benghazi or what happened at Fort Hood, to have this impression that the terrorist days that we went through under the Bush administration are over, and that there isn't that kind of a threat anymore, or it's not the same with this president who is much more open-minded or progressive or what have you, when the reality of the situation is the bad guys don't care who we are. Major Nidal Hassan was radicalized by Anwar al-Awlaki. He was recruited and he was told to do what he did, and he did it as part of the war on terror, the war against us in jihad. And because we don't want to send a message out there that this kind of thing can happen on our own soil, that we'll just say it's workplace violence. Oh, by the way, we don't want to prejudice the jury in their deliberations to see that this guy's really a bad guy. I mean, that's the world we're living in right now, and it's too bad.
It is too bad, and I hearken back to the Fort Dick 6 many years ago, when they were thwarted in their attempt, their plans to kill as many soldiers as they can at Fort Dick, or could at Fort Dix, and they were, that was called attempted terrorism. So I guess if you don't succeed, it could be terrorism, but if you succeed, it can't be called terrorism. And, Congressman, a lot of people concerned, on this show and elsewhere, that the infiltration, the administration's acquiescence to groups like CARE and others have changed the FBI's ability to ask certain questions, the training manuals on what to look out for. I mean, who could have thought that 12 years later, after 9/11, that we would be so overwhelmingly bending over backwards to be politically correct that we're losing the ability to protect ourselves in many respects.
Well, what you just said will be validated if this happens. What I've asked, and what Congressman Carter, who's the congressman from Fort Hood, has asked. Okay, fine. This trial is going to start happening now. It should be over by Thanksgiving. If and when he is convicted, just so the jury is no longer prejudiced, can you please then classify it an act of terror then? And so that these guys can get their Purple Heart and their So it has nothing to do with the war on terror or anything. It's just we're trying to look after these soldiers and their families. If they still say at that point that they're not willing to call it an act of terrorism, then what you just said is going to be validated.
Yeah, well, I hope I'm dead wrong for the sake of these people who are suffering and deserve the help. And really, thank you on behalf of the American people who would like to do something. When they see that, their heart breaks, they get angry, like mine. And when we see someone like you speaking out and the other congressmen who are taking action on this, it warms our hearts. And thank you very much. And I hope you'll come back, sir.
Thank you.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Take care. My pleasure. Congressman Tom Rooney. He is a former prosecutor at Fort Hood.